As you know, we are discussing electoral management bodies uh, as the institutions of democratic transition. So, last week we started discussing the electoral management bodies in the emerging democracies, and we discussed Pakistan, Indonesia, and Afghanistan, if I am right. So, today we discuss Latin America. So the authors of this article, which is a very good article, they talk about Latin America and say that the examples of Costa Rica, Chile, and Uruguay show why election commissions are important. These countries set up independent election commissions between the 1920s and 1940s. The goal was to remove government control over elections. So before the electoral management bodies, the elections were controlled by whom? The government. The elections were controlled by the government. After that, elections became more open and fair. When governments themselves conduct elections, there are more chances of rigging and maneuvering. So if the independent election commissions, electoral management bodies, they conduct elections, they hold elections, it is more likely that the elections will be it is more likely that the elections will be yes free and fair. Political competition in these countries has stayed active and healthy. They are well known for holding regular, clean, and strongly contested elections. So first, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a great example of a country with a strong election commission. The commission has a very wide range of powers. It is treated as the fourth branch of government. You can also join me if your net is working. You can join me on YouTube. If not, you can use your slides from your group, WhatsApp group. So it is treated as the fourth branch of government, the Election Commission of Costa Rica. Its funding and member terms are protected by the Constitution. It simply means it is not directly dependent on the government. The Constitution created the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, SET, Supreme Electoral Tribunal. The SET organizes elections, counts votes, and announces results. These are the main functions of the election SET, Special Electoral Tribunal of Costa Rica. It also interprets all constitutional and legal rules related to elections. Before passing any new election law, the Legislative Assembly must first consult the SET, Special Electoral Tribunal. The state helps political parties with election expenses. It's interesting. The government provides expenses for elections to the political parties in Costa Rica. To get this support, parties must explain their spending to the SET, to the Electoral Tribunal. Because of these broad powers, the Electoral Tribunal is highly respected in Costa Rica. It has strengthened public's trust in the election process. Just creating independent election bodies is not always enough for fair elections. So, it is one of the requirements. Having independent electoral commissions, electoral management bodies, it is one requirement for fair elections. There are other requirements as well. Other institutions should also function democratically. Often, those in power still find ways to control or misuse these institutions. After Costa Rica, the authors discuss Peru. You know Peru? It's another country in Latin America, small country. In Peru, the constitution set up an independent system to run elections and count votes. But President Fujimori managed to take control of these institutions. He also changed the constitution to stay in power for 3 5 year terms. 3 5 year terms. 5 years plus 5 years plus 5 years, 15 years. Fujimori. The structure of the election bodies made this manipulation easier. Fujimori manipulated elections. The National Electoral Board (NEB) was led by a Supreme Court judge. During Fujimori's time, the judiciary was under the control of the government. So the judiciary was also not independent in Peru. Even though the constitution said election bodies were independent, they still relied on the government for money. The elections in 1995 and 2000 had many problems and irregularities. International observers criticized these elections for not being free or fair. Still, the election bodies supported the president because the election body was dependent on the president, so it supported him. As a result, Fujimori won a third term in 2000. Nicaragua, the third country in Latin America. Nicaragua also shows how election bodies can be misused. Election bodies, if they are not independent, they can be misused by the government. The Supreme Electoral Council, CSE, Supreme Electoral Council, is supposed to be an independent election authority, but President Daniel Ortega has used it to limit opposition participation. This has weakened democracy in the country. In June 2008, the CSE said two opposition parties did not complete their paperwork correctly. So there was objections were raised on the papers of the opposition parties. Because of this, they were not allowed to take part in the elections. The rule was applied unfairly. Other small parties with the same mistakes were still allowed to stay on the ballot. So the smaller parties, which were not a direct threat to his government, they were allowed, although they had made the same mistakes in filing the papers. But the opposition parties, which were a serious threat to the government, so they were not allowed to participate in the elections by under the excuse that their papers are not properly submitted. This showed clear bias in favor of the president. Venezuela, the fourth country in Latin America. Venezuela also faced problems with its election body. The so-called Independent Election Commission was controlled by the president in power. In 2004, a constitutional referendum was held to decide whether President Hugo Chavez should be removed from office. So Hugo Chavez, he was controlling the elections himself. The process was openly influenced by Chavez's government. The National Electoral Council, CNE, National Electoral Council, acted like a tool of the government. In other words, it was not independent. The constitution said the electoral council should be independent and non-political. But three of its members supported the government and two supported the opposition. So, although some of the members supported the opposition, but but the members supporting the government were in majority, 3 versus 2. The board rejected the recall petition by a 3-2 vote. You know recall
Yes,
petition?
yes.
What is this?
An initiative to remove a person from the seat or disqualify them.
Yes, it is called a recall petition. So there was a petition against Hugo Chavez to remove him from the seat, from presidency. So if the elections would be transparent, free and fair, he might have been removed. But the electoral council, under his directions, it manipulated the referendum. The board rejected the recall petition. First, it rejected the recall petition, so the referendum was not held to decide uh, his fate. The opposition then filed another recall petition. During the process, the Electoral Council worked in ways that weakened the election's fairness. Now, under the second recall petition, elections were held, referendum was held, but it was not fair enough. Just a few days before the vote, the Electoral Council dismissed polling officials and randomly chose new ones. So some of the polling officials were replaced suddenly, all of a sudden, arbitrarily. It also restricted international observers. The Electoral Council also restricted international observers. Domestic observer groups were not allowed to monitor the elections. The referendum is remembered as Venezuela's worst run election. Worst run election. In Pakistan, a famous referendum is like this. There was a famous referendum. It is also known like this. It was under Zia. Ziaul Haq had held a referendum in Pakistan in the same way. So it is widely believed that it was largely manipulated. It badly violated. Yes, maybe. I'm not sure. I have not heard about it. Maybe. So we need to check it. So it badly violated voters' rights and fairness. Haiti, another Latin American country. Haiti's election experience shows why a permanent election body is important. The 1995 elections had many problems. There were issues with organization of the elections, mistakes in voting and counting, and even some violence in Haiti. The 1997 parliamentary elections were even worse. Elections were managed by temporary bodies called Provisional Electoral Councils, CEPs, electoral councils. Most of the problems came from the failures of these councils. Many people believe the main issue was that the councils were temporary. The councils were temporary, they were not permanent. In just 10 years, 9 different councils were formed. So almost every year there was a new council. So it simply means the office holders of this council, they were not secure, and they could not assert their authority. Some were even changed during different rounds of the same election. The government often dissolved these councils whenever it wanted. So whenever the government wanted, it dissolved these councils. Because of this instability, elections in Haiti lost credibility and consistency. So the elections were not credible in Haiti and they were not consistent. Mexico. Mexico, it's an American neighbor.
Yes.
Some developing countries with past election problems have made reforms that worked well. Mexico is a good example. For about 70 years, one party controlled politics and the election system. It was the Institutional Revolutionary Party (PRI) in Mexico. It controlled politics and the election systems for about 70 years. In 1996, Mexico introduced big reforms to make elections fairer. The reforms gave more power and independence to the Federal Electoral Institute (IFE), Federal Electoral Institute. They also strengthened the Federal Electoral Tribunal (TEPJF). The new IFE was run by citizen councillors chosen by agreement among political parties. So, political parties chose the councillors for the electoral council. You just imagine that the election commissioners in Pakistan are chosen by various political parties. Although it is not a practice here,
But
but
if they're civilian, just as it is mentioned over here, the councillors were civilians.
yes, yes, civilian
Yeah, citizen councillors.
citizen. So all the election, even in Pakistan, the election commissioners are civilians. They are civilians. So there were also civilians, but the difference is there the political parties they appointed the election commissioners or the electoral councillors. It is not a practice in Pakistan. Parties do not appoint the election commissioners. The election commissioners are appointed by the election commission itself. There is a different procedure. Most of these councillors were academics. So if it happens in Pakistan, you can one day one of you, some of you may become election commissioners. The IFE, the Electoral Council, became like a fourth branch of government. It managed key tasks such as dividing campaign funds and checking how the media covered campaigns. These reforms made elections fairer and more transparent. The 1997 elections were considered free, fair, and credible. The importance of these reforms was seen again in the 2006 presidential election. Philip Calderon won by a very small margin, just 0.56 percentage points against Andre Manuel Lopez Obrador. So we are discussing Mexico. Obrador claimed the election was unfair and demanded a full recount. He also led large protests across the country. The TEPJF reviewed the case and ordered a recount of over 11,000 ballots. In September 2006, the TEPJF confirmed that the election was fair and declared Carlton the winner. Obrador still rejected the results and called himself the legitimate president. He even suggested creating a parallel government, but his movement soon lost public support. It has happened in Afghanistan when there was election between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah. There was a conflict, and both claimed to be the president, legitimate presidents. And it also happened in the United States when there was the election between Trump last time
And Hillary Clinton.
and Hillary.
Hillary Clinton.
No, Joseph Biden.
Joe Biden.
Biden won, but Trump claimed he was the legitimate president. The election is rigged. Trump claimed the election is rigged. So even so,
So, but that practically happened in Pakistan in the elections of 1970. The Awami League, the majority party that won the elections.
but
Yeah, Yahya Khan era.
but our case was different. Different in the sense that no party claimed that the election is rigged. No party claimed that the election is rigged.
Our political leaders were late. But army supported the party that had the minority votes.
No, even this was not the case. Even this was not the case. Awami League had the majority,
Yes.
and um, constitutionally, legally, the authority should have been handed over to Awami League.
Yes.
But the people at the helm of the affairs, they were not willing
Yes.
to accept the Awami League's rule.
Yes.
So it was not about elections, it was something else. So, even so, the fair handling of this crisis showed how strong election institutions helped protect democracy in Mexico. Now, after having discussed Latin America, now the authors discuss Africa. And Ghana is one of the African states. The 1992 and 1996 elections in Ghana show how good election management can help democracy. It not only ensures free and fair elections but also builds trust in the election process. In 1992, Ghana ended the ban on political parties and held presidential elections. Opposition parties said the elections were unfair and rigged. Because of this, they boycotted the parliamentary elections in December. The National Democratic Congress (NDC) then easily won those elections. In 1996, the Electoral Commission changed its approach. It focused on building trust and fairness among all parties in Ghana. The Commission created the Inter Party Advisory Committee to handle party concerns openly. Complaints from the 1992 elections were carefully reviewed. A new voter list was prepared to include everyone fairly. Both government and opposition party agents worked together at registration centers. Observers agreed that the 1996 elections were fair and credible. The Electoral Commission's efforts helped strengthen democracy and public confidence in Ghana. And another African country is Botswana. Botswana is another good example of fair and effective election management. Its election system has earned trust at home and abroad. People are generally satisfied with how elections are run. Voter education in Botswana is very strong. So they educate the voters. They motivate them that they should vote and they educate them how to vote properly so that the vote is not wasted. The Independent Election Commission prepares a voter guidebook. The guidebook explains to the purpose of elections, how to register and how to vote, how to register as a voter and how to vote. So the guidebook explains these points. It also includes information about parties, information about candidates, and about their leaders. The guide provides all information about them. The Constitution of Botswana has many safeguards to protect the Commission's independence. So, the Election Commission is independent in Botswana. Members are chosen by the Judicial Service Commission. They are selected from a list of neutral people recommended by an all party conference. An all party conference recommends neutral people. Neutral people means they are not members of any party, they are common citizens. And among from that list, the Judicial Commission appoints the commissioners. The chairman of the commission is a judge, and the judge is also appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. The commission gets its funds directly from the consolidated fund, not from the government. not from the government. What is the difference between the government budget and the consolidated fund? Anyone can explain? Consolidated fund. In Islamabad, in Pakistan, we have a consolidated fund. All the government revenue which comes through taxes or from government business enterprises, the profit, or the fees from school or the hospitals, all the income which comes from different departments, it is collected at one point under one institution. I think it is Federal Board of Revenue, FBR. So the consolidated fund is under its control. Then the parliament, it allocates, it makes allocations, the National Assembly of Pakistan. So it keeps its budget for itself, and it allocates the remaining amount to the cabinet, the executive, which is run by the prime minister and his cabinet. So parliament's fund is independent of the government. Our parliament in Islamabad, our government does not allocate the budget, does not decide the National Assembly's budget or the Senate's budget. Oh, our Senate and National Assembly, they decide their budget on their own for themselves. And they also decide the budget, the allocations for the government. And they also decide the different details in the budget session. It is also decided by the assembly, and the government is bound to expend the money under those guidance, under those rules and regulations. So similarly, where election commissions are independent, the allocation is not made by the government, it is made by the parliament to the election commission directly. So the commission gets its funds directly from the consolidated fund, not from the government. It has also set up a party liaison committee in every constituency. This helps political parties communicate and solve issues peacefully. Because of these measures, the election commission is respected by voters and political parties. South Africa, it's a famous country. I think all everyone knows it well. South Africa is one of the best examples of a successful independent election commission. The 1994 elections were the country's first non racial elections. You know, non racial elections?
Yes.
What does it mean?
These elections were held after the apartheid, South African apartheid, and people were not discriminated on basis of their races.
All of you know apartheid? There was an apartheid in South Africa. It was the white rule, white race. It was in minority, and it ruled the majority. Majority were blacks, are still they are still in, blacks are in majority. So it was not a democratic rule. It was a minority rule. The whites, they were in power. So then there was a long struggle under Nelson Mandela. There was a revolution, and then the blacks, they also got equal status, equal to the whites. So then the apartheid came to the end. The 1994 elections were the country's first non racial elections. Both the 1994 and 1999 post apartheid national elections had some technical problems. Still, everyone accepted the results as fair and legitimate. This was mainly because the Independent Election Commission IEC was trusted by the people. So people trusted the commission. It was seen as independent, fair, and representative of the new South Africa. So after the end of the apartheid, it was a new South Africa. The constitution created the IEC as a permanent and independent body. The commission's budget is approved by parliament and audited by the auditor general. It means the budget is not allocated by the government, rather by the parliament. So it is independent of the government. The Auditor General's office is also constitutionally independent, ensuring financial freedom for the IEC. A major goal was to protect the IEC from interference by the former apartheid government. The Electoral Commission Act clearly states that the IEC must work without political or government pressure. So it is mentioned in the rules, in the law, that there should be no pressure on the election commission. Members of the commission must be neutral, respected individuals, and not linked to any political party in South Africa. For transparency, some members from the international community are also included. To prevent misuse of power, special electoral courts were created. These courts review all IEC decisions to ensure fairness and integrity. Voters, opposition parties, and international observers widely agreed that the elections held by the IEC were free and fair. Now, Central and Eastern Europe, the electoral management bodies in emerging democracies in Central and Eastern Europe. Poland and Hungary. Poland and Hungary are new democracies that came after the end of communism. Both countries chose to have independent election commissions. All of you understand it well of the end of communism in Eastern Europe?
Yes, the fall of USSR in 1990.
Ah, yes. So the 10 Eastern European countries, 10 Eastern European countries, they were part of the Soviet Union, USSR. So when Soviet Union broke up, there's call from the producer. Hello. Okay. So we are discussing Poland and Hungary. Both countries chose to have independent election commissions. Yes, I was telling you about the post-communist era in these. So these 10 East European countries and 5 Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
No, no Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is not.
Armenia.
Ah.
Kyrgyzstan.
They all of these five have Stan at the end. Stan. Azerbaijan doesn't have Stan. So these 15 countries were under the Soviet occupation. 10 Eastern European countries and 5 Central Asian countries. They were part of the Soviet Union. When Soviet Union broke up, imploded, they became independent. So the Eastern European countries they started democracy, most of them afresh. China? No, not complete. There were also conflicts between the Soviet Union and China. There were conflicts as well. So it's a long history. Yes, on some issues and particularly at some points in time, they had an alliance. In the beginning, the Soviets supported a lot, they supported Chinese, but slowly, gradually, Chinese became confident and self-sufficient, and now they are more powerful than Russia. So in Poland, the National Election Commission (NEC) manages all elections. The NEC includes three judges from the Constitutional Tribunal, three from the Supreme Court, and three from the Supreme Administrative Court. Poland has the long tradition of an independent judiciary. Because of this, people have a high level of trust in how elections are managed. Recent elections in Russia, especially the 2007 presidential elections, were called unfair and non competitive by Freedom House. So now we are discussing Russia. The ruling party, United Russia, controlled the whole election process. Opposition parties were not allowed to compete freely. They had no access to major media or government resources. Government resources were used to support United Russia. United Russia is Putin's party. Hmm? Is it?
Yes.
Earlier elections in Russia also had problems. Even though Russia has been a democracy since 1991, Freedom House rates it as not free. One main reason for weak elections is that the electoral commissions are not independent. Local election commissions depend on local administration for help and support. Many election officers also work for local government departments, election officers. This makes the election process less independent. The election process is not fully independent. Every candidate can appoint one non voting member to election commissions to ensure transparency. Non voting member, the every candidate can appoint one non voting member who cannot vote in decisions, but at least he or she can keep an eye on the procedure, what is happening. But most candidates do not do this because they lack funds or supporters. So if a candidate has not many people to appoint, so he or she cannot appoint. Similarly, it needs finance. To make elections better, reforms are needed. Election commissions should not depend on local administrators. Clear rules should stop local officials from taking part in election management. So local officials should not have a right. They should not have the authority to interfere in the elections. Belarus is another Eastern European country. It is in Eastern Europe, I think so. Belarus. The 2004 parliamentary election in Belarus is a clear example of poor election management. The election had many serious problems and irregularities. District election commissions removed several registered candidates just days before voting. The reasons for removing them were weak and unfair. When appeals were made to the Central Election Commission, all appeals were rejected. There were no checks to stop people from voting more than once. Local administrations handled voter registration, but there was no national voter list. There was no national voter list. Because of this, voter registration could not be checked properly. The whole system of election management was poorly designed. The system of election management was poorly designed. It was not good. Did not have a good structure. The government had strong control over who was appointed to the commissions. The Central Election Commission had 12 members, and the president appointed six of them. So, if the half of the members are appointed by the president, so how can it be independent? Obviously, the president will appoint his or her own people. Many members also worked in government offices. The election laws did not ensure fairness or transparency. There was no balance between government and opposition members in the election, in the commission. There was no balance between government and opposition members in the commission. The election officials used laws in a biased way to help the government. The rule that the election commission must work independently was ignored. Lastly, Middle East. So far, we have discussed Asia, Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and now Africa. Yes, and now Middle East. Democracy is not the main system of government in the Middle East. Most countries in the region are ruled by authoritarian regimes. There are 21 countries in the Middle East. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit's Index of Democracy, Israel and Palestine are called flawed democracies. Flawed. They are not correct democracies. Lebanon, Turkey, and Iraq are described as hybrid regimes. So there are many hybrid regimes in the Middle East, including Lebanon, Turkey, and Iraq. It is ranked as such by the Index of Democracy, which is prepared by the Economist's Intelligence Unit. The Economist is a famous British newspaper, so it has its famous Index of Democracy. So it makes a ranking of different countries on that ranking. So under that ranking, Turkey is a hybrid regime. Yes, many people say Tayyip Erdogan's rule is not fair.
So because he didn't allow opposition to stand against him in the recent elections.
Yes, he is taking harsh measures against the opposition. He has taken. All the other countries are labeled as authoritarian regimes. All the other countries in the Middle East are labeled as authoritarian regimes. Lebanon. Lebanon holds elections, but they are mostly symbolic. Freedom House does not see Lebanon as an electoral democracy. There are several reasons for this problem. The main issue comes from Lebanon's unfair electoral laws. These laws are based on religious and group inequalities. Because of this, free and fair elections are not possible. Electoral districts are drawn in unfair ways to help current leaders win again. It is called gerrymandering. You know this term? Gerrymandering. The electoral districts, they are maneuvered. Okay, the lines are drawn, which part of which city will be in which constituency. So it is also used. This technique is also used to victimize the opposition and yes, to get own people elected. It is called gerrymandering. Electoral districts, electoral constituencies are drawn in unfair ways to help current leaders win again. The Ministry of Interior controls and supervises the elections. There is no independent body to manage the elections. This makes the election process biased and unclear. There is also no proper system to handle election complaints. Iran, our neighbor. Iran became a nominal democracy after ending its monarchy in 1979. The constitution allows for an elected president and parliament. However, the real power lies with the supreme leader. An unelected group called the Council of Guardians controls elections. This council decides who can run for office and approves election results. The Ministry of Interior manages the elections. The Council of Guardians supervises the whole process. The Supreme Leader appoints half of the 12 members of the Council. He also has control over key appointments in the Ministry of Interior. In the 2009 presidential election, protests erupted after results were disputed. The losing candidate, Mir Hussain Muswi, claimed the election was rigged. He asked the Council of Guardians to cancel the results. The council did a partial recount and confirmed Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as the winner. Still, protests and unrest continued in Iran. Until elections are managed by an independent and neutral body, Iran's election process will remain weak in legitimacy and trust. Egypt. Egypt has, remember, this paper was written in 2009, I think. So it's not very fresh. So in several Middle Eastern countries, the situation has changed. Egypt has made some changes to its election system in recent years, but it is still not a real democracy. Currently, it is not a democracy at all.
Yes.
General Sisi is ruling in Egypt now. When this article was written, there were some sort of elections. So under General Sisi, there is no democracy at all. Before 2005, presidential elections were not competitive at all. Only one candidate was nominated and confirmed by Parliament. Parliament was controlled by President Hosni Mubarak's National Democratic Party. So Hosni Mubarak's party controlled the parliament. After that, a public vote was held in the form of a yes or no referendum. These referendums were often manipulated. Mubarak usually won with 93 to 98% of the votes. Hosni Mubarak. Whenever there were elections, he would get 98% of the votes or 93% of the votes. So it is widely believed that they were because he rigged the elections.
Yes.
He every time he rigged the elections.
Instead, there wasn't even opposition against Hosni Mubarak.
Yes, yes. That is why there was the bloody revolution.
Yes.
Yeah. In 2005, Egypt changed its constitution to allow multiple candidates for president, but the changes did not create real competition. Opposition candidates could only run if their party was licensed for at least 5 years. So if a party registers today, for next 5 years, it will not be able to run elections according to the Egyptian law. So it will run elections after 5 years. Their party also needed at least 5% of seats in both houses of parliament. So if a party does not have at least 5% of the seats in parliament, it cannot run in the elections, the next elections. So again, these are the measures which foiled the discouraged competition. So, in fact, democratic politics is healthy political competition. If there is healthy political competition, then it is democracy. If competition is not allowed, it is not democracy. This made it very hard for small opposition parties to take part. Independent candidates also faced strict rules. They needed support from at least 250 elected members of both houses. Independent candidates.
Too much. 250.
Just imagine. Just imagine. Independent candidates needed support from at least 250 elected members of both houses. So in some countries, someone is elected prime minister if he or she has supports of so many parliamentarians. Since Mubarak's party controlled both houses, it was almost impossible for any independent opposition candidate to compete. The Egyptian constitution gives the judiciary power to supervise elections. After the constitutional changes, judges tried to use this power fully and have full control over elections. The government made only a surface level change. Judges were placed in charge of every polling station. Voting was spread over several days, so judges could travel across the country. But in reality, this law did not stop election manipulation. The cheating was simply done outside polling stations. Cheating was done outside polling stations where judges had no control. The 2005 constitutional amendments also created a Presidential Electoral Commission (PEC). Presidential Electoral Commission. This commission was made up of current and former judges, but its independence was weak. Why it was weak? Because half of its members were chosen by the ruling parliament, NDP controlled parliament. The PEC had full power to approve candidates, manage elections, and count votes. As expected, these changes did not bring real political improvement. The 2005 presidential elections again ended with Mubarak's easy victory. In 2006, another reform wave began to replace judges with a new election commission. The government claimed it would be independent and neutral. However, many still doubt whether it was a real step toward democracy or just another way to control elections. So, with this discussion comes to an end.
2011